Sustainability starts at home, how to turn your everyday situation today into your tomorrowland, the global solution. Week 15, Thinking Out Loudest, Lecture 4.3. Sustainability starts at home, so please do try this at home, making your home or neighborhood sustainable in the virtual world. This lecture puts the tools of alternative reality creation in your hands, in your home, in your life. In this module, we encourage you to put these tools fully in the global context, global-local, that is to say, firmly in the realm of the lived experience of you, the student, so that you can see the connections between the abstract fantasy lands made possible through technology, the larger context that the global world stage is offering for sustainability and resilience, and the intensively local environment of your school, neighborhood, community, or region. What we want to do is leave the realm of the hyper-abstract behind and apply our newfound ability to vary the amount of simplification and limitation to your own environment. See, for years, many of us have marveled at and enjoyed playing the games of Will Wright, creator of SimCity, SimAnt, The Sims, and Spore and SimCity Societies. These landmark simulation games made it possible to be the mayor of a new city, dealing with the costs and benefits of providing municipal services as we build roads and bridges and subdivisions, or in another game, to steer an ant colony to sustainability against threats, or to furnish your house and explore your love life and social decisions and their consequences, as in The Sims, or try to evolve a planet from a muck stage to a spacefaring civilization status without going extinct, as in Spore, or when SimCity Societies came out, which I used to play with my son about 7 years ago, try to power your neighborhood with windmills and solar panels and eliminate coal plants without crashing the economy. Each iteration of the games got more and more realistic, and my son asked once at the age of 4, "Daddy, can we put our house in here and play in our neighborhood?" The answer back then was, well, no, not really. I did create our house and neighborhood in Blender 3D, and I showed my son how we could put solar panels on the roof and biodigesters on the porch and even an incinerator into the virtual kitchen, and then walk through the house that he knew so well, seeing how everything looked. But there wasn't a game aspect to what I was able to do by myself. Even when I put our house into the game engine of Elder Scrolls or Fallout 4, so we could do things like ride a horse around the neighborhood or put monsters in our simulated home world and pick up weapons and shoot them, we couldn't do much about sustainability apart from the usual survival game mode of trying to stay alive. Meanwhile, the games were evolving. City Skylines came out as an improvement on SimCity Societies, and with each expansion pack, you could see the consciousness of the game developers evolving with the technologies and the zeitgeist. One of my students, Patel, brought in her copy of City Skylines' Green Cities pack and showed us how she was able to build a state-of-the-art eco-city that she could then outfit with everything from rooftop gardens and organic farmers markets to personal and municipal wind towers and solar panels and geothermal heat pumps and wave generators, all the way up to more exotic technologies like the experimental solar power towers that are still being tested in the field. These giant concrete towers rising funnel-like from miles of greenhouses that use heat to create an updraft of wind to turn horizontal wind turbines, effectively taking a still, sunny day and turning it into a local and controllable tornado for energy harvest. They exist and you can put them in the game. The game is indeed impressive and it's in its visionary technological offerings, and the number of variable parameters that you can manipulate in the simulation to try and achieve a workable triple bottom line is very good. It seems to have been developed by people who really understand systems thinking, who apply Nexus thinking to their eco-city development and get the competing demands of environmental, social, and economic sustainability right. Now, the only problem that my student said she had was that after many hours of gameplay, she lost interest because, quote, it didn't feel real. It didn't feel like I could apply what I was learning. Sure, it was a lot more interesting and fun than simply learning these concepts in class from books or lectures. But at the end of the day, I felt the same sense of helplessness, she said, that I feel from taking classes in sustainability. I see the problems, and I get the idea that we have solutions, but I don't feel empowered to do much about it except give more presentations and talks. Do you feel that way too? She said, I wish the game would let me, retrofit my own house. I mean, my real house. If we could use the game to try out and price out improvements to our own apartments or homes or businesses or schools to see how they would look and show them to others and explore different scenarios, that would hold my interest. But as good as these games are, she said, they end up frustrating me. I want to be able to have fun and learn and come up with solutions. I know the technology is here. I'm just mad that nobody has used it so we can help our neighborhoods. Now, Nicole was from an economically depressed African-American neighborhood in industrial Ohio that had been the victim of many environmental injustices. She had come to Patel to work on ways to improve her community and communities like it, hoping to get ideas here at Patel that could help with better urban ecology planning for low-income residents. She loved gaming and loved how the technologies were evolving, but shared my deep frustration that the designers of the games were wasting an opportunity to truly uplift and empower communities and address environmental injustices. She even suggested that the corporations funding game developers might not really want compelling games that allow local neighborhoods to simulate and create their own better futures. Now, during that class, I said, well, if the professional developers aren't interested in helping, and if many corporations might be against it, then my suggestion is that we do it ourselves, without the corporations. The software is available, open source, free, and there are a million tutorials online to learn how to use them, so you don't really even have to take classes, and we can use our time in our classes to work together as a team to create a true Masters of Sustainability game. We could create an MMORPG, massively multiplayer online role-playing game, in which each of us creates our own home and neighborhood and community modeled after their real-world analogs, and then create different storylines where we face challenges and limitations and inefficiencies and find ways to overcome them. Including zombies? Asked one student. Of course, including zombies, I replied. That goes without saying. At least for gamers like me. And I wasn't being facetious. Zombie survival horror is one of the most popular film and game genres. You know that. And many a zombie series, from Walking Dead with its solar-powered eco community Alexandria, replete with rainwater capture and raised bed gardening, to Z Nation on Netflix with its food waste-powered biodigesters supplying up to 4 hours of electricity a day, as the general said, has used sustainability ideas to explain how the survivors make it through the zombie apocalypse. Of course, in my game, I told them I would dig a biodigester moat around the house with sloping chute funnels leading to food grinders, and then ring a bell to attract the zombie horde and use their ground-up corpses to give me a perpetual source of electricity and hot water, at least until all the zombies, which actually are a non-renewable fuel in a sense, were all used up. Now, at that point, we would have to turn once again to solar and wind and geothermal and food waste-based biodigesters, supplementing with the occasional zombie that inevitably would arise when the happy survivors die of old age, since we learned from The Walking Dead that that is the ultimate fate of all the dead in a zombie apocalypse. Sounds crazy, right? But designing such a system to work in the game would be a very real STEM exercise in engineering a good digester system, and it would certainly be the perfect vehicle for inspiring student and public interest in the real technologies that we need to combat climate change. Biodigesters, after all, are Drawdown Solutions number 30 and number 64 in Paul Hawkins' Drawdown book, which lists the 100 top solutions for combating our climate crisis. But if people aren't motivated to get them scaled up and out in time for real life, perhaps the threat of a zombie horde attack provides the necessary incentive. Now, regardless of how you may feel about certain fictional tropes like zombies, we all have to confront the problem of messaging and must find the right message for each audience. My graduate professor, Dr. Susanna B. Hecht, author of Fate of the Forest, Developers, Destroyers, and Defenders of the Amazon, used to say in class that most of our communication about environmental issues amounted to a kind of in-group Aesop's fable, just so story, which we accept or reject depending on our subculture. Statistics and facts must be interpreted through a narrative or just so story in order to feel like truth and to inspire action in any group. And if you get the story framework wrong for that group, don't be surprised if your stats about climate threats or health or extinction rebellions are looked at by the other side as fake news. It's such a delicate balancing act that we can't really tell you exactly how to go about creating your story, except to say keep it honest and be transparent about your biases. Then let the library of many biases be unbiased. There are sincere attempts to create rubrics for framing the discourse, and some of our Patel students have attended certification courses in such hopeful movements. For example, Rainey Thompson in our PCGS Climate Mitigation and Adaptation class in the fall of 2019 attended the Frameworks Institute program on climate change communications, and she came away with these recommendations that she passed to the class through her notes. The goal is to make conversations productive, creative, and solutions-based. There's a tone, and they gave a tone example, and the first tone has fear factor, but the second is more explanatory and uplifting. And this is an example of the use of tone. Diffuse the science of climate to infuse the science of framing. Infuse the science. Use shared language and themes. Shared language. Empower citizens. Teach fundamentals of climate and ocean change. Offer compelling examples. Use values, starting with broad ideas of what is good to help direct people's attitudes from the beginning of the conversation. Use examples of broad ideas about protection and responsible management. Use explanatory metaphors. Most people don't understand how climate change works, but by using metaphors, it can help the individual visualize and understand what climate change is. The example given is a heat-trapping blanket, for example. It's a way to pack in a lot of meaning in a quick conversation. And then there's solutions. If not given a solution, people may think that it's too big for them to do anything, or just get confused about what to do. Giving solutions fosters hope and encouragement. They also mention matching the scale of the problem by using solutions that are community-based or policy-based. One must understand the public and understand their cultural models, which are widely shared, which are highly patented, and which are implicit in seeing how the world works. Politicians have used the swamp to help us make sense of our world because people understand there's dangerous things in the swamp, like alligators. Otherwise, we have cognitive holes, like the ocean is too large to harm or too big to fix. Science literacy aims to inform people with facts, but it contains communication traps. And the problem with the crisis trope is that while it gives temporary attention, it can result in compassion fatigue. You have to do at least one thing that empowers individual action, but separate that from community action and explore the invisible processes. Share the mechanisms, for example, of climate change. Share incidents and accidents. Share the big picture facts that lead to incidents. And then you can use cute critters, explanatory chains, and how we're connected to them. It's about values as a starting point on a topic. These values act as a lens as people interpret the information. You can use a big value like protection. Protection is a big value. We have a duty to safeguard people, places, and habitats. So in fact, you could use a narrative that talks about homeland security, saying we need to make our homes secure, and here's how. Then there's responsible management. When faced with problems, we must take a sensible approach. And then we use explanatory chains that are clear, concise explanations of the problem. Fill in the gaps on expert and public thinking. That's your role. Brief and powerful explanations are what are needed, connecting conditions to human actions. Merely naming the issue does not explain how it works. We need to create an understanding of the nature of the problem and not just the scope. So we use explanatory metaphors, and we have to be the bridge between expert and public thinking. The metaphors that we use identify specific communication goals for the metaphors. Now, the course taught her that problems must be followed up with invitations to solutions, that we have to tackle problems collectively, and the solutions need to match the scale of the problem. That way you can shift individual actions to policy or communal actions. So as I went through her notes on the Frameworks Institute recommendations, I kept seeing glocal, empowerment, tackling the problems collectively by letting people individually work on the solutions so the scale matches the problems that we feel that we can actually be involved in. The Frameworks Institute provides what they call tested tools to make communication more effective, and these takeaways are tremendously important. But we have to ask ourselves, who were they tested on and shown to work with? I mean, what if you're dealing with a person or a tribe that doesn't share any of your values? What if you're dealing with narcissists and sadists and psychopaths? Don't laugh. As so well documented in the 2003 documentary, The Corporation, when the criteria of the DSM-4 checklist for mental health were applied to corporate behavior, the diagnosis came back psychopathic. The film showed the Personality Diagnostic Checklist, World Health Organization ICD-10, the Manual of Mental Disorders DSM-4, and singled out these particular traits that are the proven hallmark of most corporate behavior. 1. Callous unconcern for the feelings of others. I mean, look, workers' needs and rights are often not met. 2. Incapacity to maintain enduring relationships. Firms freely fire and lay off workers, and then they pick up and leave whenever they find a more profitable opportunity elsewhere and don't clean up their mess. Reckless disregard for the safety of others. Corporations routinely are found guilty of health, safety, and environmental violations. 4. Deceitfulness, repeated lying, and conning others for profit. Hey, fraud in labeling and misrepresentation of risk are commonplace. 5. Incapacity to experience guilt. The bad behavior is embedded in the culture and encouraged as rules of the game or business as usual. And 6. Failure to conform to societal norms with respect to lawful behaviors. Corporations have been shown to routinely flout and break the law and then settle out of court for verdict guilty fines that are only a fraction of the profits accrued by breaking the law. At the end of the scene, they say, subject, the corporation, diagnosis of personality disorder, psychopath. I highly encourage you to watch the whole documentary, but just that section is very valuable. In the documentary, you will see when you watch it, a corporate CEO describes their businesses as, quote, externalization machines. And he compares corporations to sharks, saying it's in the DNA of the corporate charter, it's how we operate. Now, since corporations were built to profit from generating negative externalities that they don't have to pay for or internalize into their business model, and since their profits accrue substantially from devaluing the true cost of labor or materials, cutting corners on or eliminating health and safety, and dumping troublesome toxins or pollutions in the global or regional commons, it may not matter all that much in the big picture if you can convince your stubborn uncle at Thanksgiving that climate change is real, much less anthropogenic. You will, at the end of the day, still all sit down to eat the GMO turkey and corn syrup-laden, monocrop-grown, pesticide and herbicide-intensive cranberry sauce and transgenic wheat-based stuffing, won't you? Walmart or Publix will still get the lion's share of your dollars and continue to support atrocious suppliers who are causing the lion's share of pollution and habitat destruction and cruelty and climate change. So despite wonderfully clever little apps like the Cranky Uncle game, a game that teaches defense against fake news, which is scientifically called a form of active inoculation and which, quote, research has identified as a key solution in making the public resilient against fake news, end quote, it's unclear whether we can truly improve conditions merely by taking on cranky, misinformed relatives at home. And yet, changing things at home is really the only place we can start, isn't it, if we want to empower ourselves? After all, it is our collective purchases to lead our daily lives at home that keep the corporations wealthy and inspire them to do business as usual. The crankyuncle.com website boldly declares that gamification leads to learning, and I'm in wholehearted agreement. The only difference between my approach and theirs, and I want to emphasize that they are complementary and by no means mutually exclusive, because we need both and. We need postmodern both and solutions, not either or modernist divisions. My only difference with them is that the kind of games I'm suggesting that we create and play in this class involve transforming your lifestyle at home, not just your family's opinions about the politics and economics and policy directions our nation takes. In the game I'm suggesting, we pre-visualize our own homes and regions and practices with an eye towards simulating and experimenting with best practices that stay within our 9 planetary boundaries, that meet all 17 of our Sustainable Development Goals, that implement as many of the 100 vetted drawdown solutions as possible, that meet all of the 6 Sigma tools and techniques for process improvement, that meet top standards of LEED or LEED certification, and satisfy as many of the other established criteria for making the world a better place that you are learning here at Patel on your journey toward being a sustainability professional. Those are the illusory rules of the game that Bernard Suits talks about in your readings from The Grasshopper, Games, Life, and Utopia. And they are the ludic limitations I suggest be included in our gamification of sustainable simulations. And I suggest it starts at home, with your home. Once you can play your way to full implementation and adoption of sustainable practices as you practice in the game, you can start implementing in the real world. And along the way, you can always sit down at Thanksgiving with your family and that cranky uncle and show them all that the game is fun and fruitful, and that the real-world implementation is nothing to fear, but will indeed be conservatively cost-effective, and that in fact, living sustainably, to quote Jane McGonigal in the reading for this week, will make all our lives super better, because this game and the reality it makes possible is not broken. It's created of the people, by the people, for the people, and is indeed, quote, a revolutionary approach to getting stronger, happier, braver, and more resilient, powered by the science of games. And who knows, maybe such games and the application they inspire can even inspire and heal the psychopaths. Sustainability, through games or best practice, simply has to be made more fun and satisfying than the game they are already in, right? So, shall we play?